Okay, it's Wednesday night, November 8th, and that means it's time for another edition of the Progress Report. And tonight we're doing things a little differently because it's just my good friend Mike Farley, the handsome guy on my left, and me. We did not choose to bring a guest in because there's two momentous things that are happening in the city and in the nation. This is the 1-year anniversary of the electoral victory of Donald J. Trump to become President of the United States. 1 year ago today, the most shocking upset in modern American political history for the highest office in the land came upon us. We want to probably talk about that because I think you guys out there, some of you, and most of you are guys, still believe Trump is the great answer to everything. We will take that on tonight. And the other thing, of course, is the monumental election we had in Manchester yesterday. Historic election. And outstanding election results in the city, and not all to the good from our point of view, but overwhelmingly positive, starting with the candidate who became the first woman in history of Manchester to become the mayor of the city, Joyce Craig. And that is just makes everything seem really fine.
I wish I had an applause
from my point of view.
I would have pushed the applause button.
We would push the applause button. Really I was a doubter. I wasn't sure she could do it. I thought Ted, by the way, I'd like to say something right here, Mike. Ted lost this election. He's not used to losing elections. He's lost very few. The only other election he lost was when he tried to be the Republican gubernatorial candidate 2 years ago, and he did not succeed there. But in that, he's won every election he's been in, including two in which I've been his opponent. And I want to just say to Ted that we have our strong differences with you, Ted, as did Joyce, who prevailed against you yesterday. But I will say that I think you believe the city is, think you believe in the city and want the best for the city, and you work very hard in your own way to advance the city's future, and I applaud you for your contribution and wish you well. Having said that, I'm glad we have a new mayor. And we certainly hope we're going to have participation from you.
I was going to say, this would be a great show to call in, help us out, help direct the conversation. Great show to call us in. We want to be provocative. We want to be useful. We want to provide information, but we want assistance from our viewers. 640-3091. I hope you call in. By the way, one other thing I just wanted to say. Every week I try to get on my own Facebook page and tell folks what the progress report for that week is going to involve. I did that tonight, or this afternoon. Not really very timely, but, 3-4 hours before showtime. We also have our own progress report Facebook page. And I forget to mention that because I'm going to try and post on the Progress Report Facebook page every week what we've got to offer you for that week in terms of our guests and our subjects. So I hope those of you that are watching us, and I know many more are than call in, I know that, I hope you'll check out either my own Facebook page, and especially let's get the Facebook page for the Progress Report a little more active. That would be great if you guys could click like. That way a posting gets passed on through to your Facebook friends. So if you could like the Progress Report Facebook page, that would help us get the word out more, and we owe a duty to do a little bit more to keep it up to date.
Yep. So Mike, where do you want to go first? Do you want to go to Trump's year ago was astounding?
Well, I want to stick with the routine, Bob, even though we're doing a little different. I want to start off with a POTUS report on the Progress Report.
I love this feature.
I'm not going to go big because I think we're going to devote a good portion of the show to talking about big picture. But this POTUS report on the Progress Report for this week focuses on something we've talked about before, and that is it's not necessarily what he says. Keep an eye also on what he does. And I would remind people about Congressman Mike Capuano's website that has the Behind the Curtain feature, where you can go see a continuously updated listing of very important bill signings, executive orders, etc., that are actually taking place while this whirlwind of
TV news and rhetoric and everything else is going on. These are things that are affecting our lives. As part of that, I want to talk about the reaction to the church shooting in Texas. President Trump did react from overseas to that shooting and adopted the well-rehearsed position that we've seen before. Too soon to talk about it. Now's not the time to talk about it. I don't think
thoughts and prayers will fix it.
I don't think the argument now's not the time to talk about it is ever correct under any circumstance for any issue, period. But then he also made an effort which really, really frosts me when people do this. It's not a gun issue, it's a mental health issue. It's a mental health issue. You know, let's blame that segment of our society. Let's throw up our hands and say, you know, there's nothing we can do. But I want to point something out again, looking behind the curtain, watch what they do, not what they say. This president, who is apparently or supposedly so concerned about the impact of mental health and gun violence, just recently signed a bill that rolled back a very specific regulation of the Obama era. The Obama regulation said that if you apply to the Social Security Department for a disability payment due to mental illness, let me say that again, if you apply to the government for money because you say you are mentally ill and you want to receive disability payments for that, now there's nothing wrong with that. But if you do that, the Obama regulation required that that fact be entered onto the FBI register so that you could not buy a gun. We hear the argument that we don't want mentally ill people buying a gun. The Obama administration put forward and passed a regulation saying that people who self-reported as mentally ill and sought government benefit for that condition could not buy a gun. Well, the president, within the past few weeks, just signed a bill that Congress passed. Funny how they can get some bills through that would roll back that regulation. So now, if I were to apply for Social Security benefits, making the argument that I am mentally ill, and many of you viewers may think that's perfectly something I should do, but be that as it may, I would not be prevented from buying a gun as a result of that fact. And I just think it's an inconsistent argument, Bob. And that's the POTUS report and the progress report this week.
I want to go a little further with this, Mike, because a year ago today, I think a disaster befell our country with this election of this man. I think the worst person ever elected president of the United States. I think he's going to turn out to be the worst president, but I have no doubt he's the worst person ever elected president of the United States. From boasting about sexually assaulting women, and many women have said that wasn't just a boast, it's a reality. He said he would sue these women, he never has. There were at least a dozen of them. I mean, from that on and on and on.
Not releasing the tax returns.
Not releasing the tax returns. But I wanted to go to his inaugural address, which was, of course, January 20th of this year. And here's some of his inaugural address. But for too many of our citizens, a different reality exists. Mothers and children trapped in poverty in our inner cities, rusted out factories, scattered like tombstones across the landscape of our nation, an education system flush with cash. Some people would doubt that. But leaves our young and beautiful students deprived of knowledge, and the crime and gangs and drugs that have stolen too many lives and robbed our country of so much unrealized potential. And here's the concluding line in this bit. This American carnage stops right here and now. He said that on the steps of the Capitol on January 20th of this year. Oh, this American carnage stops right now. How about Las Vegas? How about the church shootings in Texas? There's carnage. It didn't stop with him. How about after denouncing Hillary Clinton because she was Secretary of State when an attack happened in a consulate in Libya? How about the loss of our 4 military personnel, highly trained, Rangers in Niger, where he wouldn't even talk about it.
And hasn't yet, I believe.
And hasn't really yet talked about it. How about that? And I tell you another one. One of the things that I think led a lot of people to vote for this man for president was his promise to drain the swamp, by which he meant the political fix culture in Washington, D.C. Hey, you Trump supporters out there, call me and tell me, how has he done about draining the swamp? How's that going? We have a Secretary of Health and Human Services that had to be canned because he was using, government planes to fly for private events. We have a Attorney General who he's denigrated because he recused himself and would not do his bidding on, keeping a special counsel from being appointed.
Not to mention who repeatedly lies to Congress, but that's another
Not
story.
mention that. We have a Secretary of State, whose prior job was the CEO of ExxonMobil. Not exactly an eleemosynary. That means a charitable institution, folks. For you Trump voters that don't use big words, and he who said in a moment of candor that Trump was a moron, and he never denied it. And then Trump said, "Well, I want to challenge him to an IQ test." This is the President of the United States challenging his own cabinet officers to an IQ test. We have the Secretary of Treasury, Mnuchin, and his wife taking a government plane to Kentucky to go to Fort Knox, but the real reason was so they could watch the eclipse and see a beautiful eclipse from above the clouds, wherever they might be, in a government charter. We have Betsy DeVos as the Secretary of Education, who wants to make possible massive investment in private education at the expense of public education. This is a cabinet, folks, of billionaires. We've never had a cabinet stuffed with so many people of great wealth. Are you feeling the swamp being drained here, folks? Is the swamp being drained? The lobbyists are at large. Not to mention his campaign manager during the time of the Republican convention last year, Paul Manafort, now under indictment with a colleague of his because he failed to report his activities as a lobbyist favoring Ukraine and the pro-Russian Ukrainian elements. It just goes on and on and on.
Bob, despite that, and I'm sure there's more to say, if you go out into the countryside right now, or if you go out into the streets of Manchester right now and talk to people who voted for Donald Trump, you're going to have a hard time finding folks who are going to say, I'm giving up on this guy. What you're going to hear is, if you guys would shut up and let him do his job, you're the problem. If the Democrats wouldn't be so obstructionist in Congress and not let the repeal of Obamacare go through, those Democrats who blocked that, that's what you're going to hear.
Well, I'd like to hear from
press.
I'd like to hear from our callers right now to call in. Are you happy with this way this man has delivered from you? Yeah, he said he was for the little guy, even though he's a guy who boasts about his own wealth all the time, maybe to excess. A guy who ran a fraudulent university, which he was facing lawsuits over, which he settled by, after saying he would never settle for paying, I think, $27 million at the lawsuit brought by the Attorney General of New York. Are you happy with this guy? Are you thinking he's draining the swamp? Are you thinking he's still for you? Now, one of the interesting election results we had yesterday was a referendum vote in Maine on whether or not to support expansion of Medicaid, which we've done in New Hampshire and we have to authorize. Maine is the first state in this 50-state union to have a vote on whether people like expanded Medicaid as part of the Affordable Care Act, which we sometimes call Obamacare. And it passed. It passed by a significant margin. Now, Trump said that one of the things he was going to do, here's his promises he's made. On day one, he was, in addition to ending the American carnage, as he called it, which has hardly happened, on day one, he said, we're going to appeal and replace Obamacare with something beautiful and better. Has that happened? Are you happy about that? Are you glad he didn't succeed in that? Those of you that may depend on government support for your health care. He said he was going to build a beautiful, he likes that word, doesn't he? Beautiful wall. Not only going to build it, Mexico was going to pay for it. Has that happened, folks? How's he doing on delivering that for you? He said he was going to have a total ban on Muslims entering the United States, which morphed into a travel ban, on certain countries he selected for this. Has that happened?
Which, by the way, I just want to point out, ties into the death of those 4 troops in Niger, because the country of Chad who has actually provided strong military support for stability in that sub-Saharan region in reaction to being put on Donald Trump's no-fly list in his Muslim ban, withdrew their troops from Niger.
Yeah.
And therefore, these soldiers who would have otherwise been escorted by Chadian troops were not. And that's a direct connection of the dots as to what happens when you go around the world insulting other countries.
So, what I'm asking you folks out there, and I hope some Trump supporters will call in, tell me where I've got this wrong.
Do you think Trump supporters watch this show, Bob?
Well, I would hope so.
Do you?
Aren't they open-minded folks? I would hope you would call in and tell me where I've got the wrong. Where has Trump met your expectations? I can understand the frustrations many people have, the feeling forgotten by our government. But, and lastly, do you think Trump has helped unify this nation? Has he followed his election night rhetoric, which called for a healing, with this really terrible inaugural address?
Pretty dark. It was
pretty dark. Has in denouncing his enemies, and he sees them everywhere. Is he a divider of this country? Is he calling for an end of the hideous bipartisanship that is freezing our Congress into inaction and inability to deal with our problems? And, that's my rant for tonight.
Well, Bob, you've given voice to what we hear a lot of among liberals, among Democrats, among those who lost the presidential race in the last round.
Yeah.
But that alone is not going to turn this around. We have to provide a positive solution to these problems. To just try to say that Trump is bad, that was the whole campaign. It didn't work.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm going to say it again. His supporters, he has a floor below which he will not go, and it looks like it's around 36, 37%. And those people are going to be there for him. Now,
I'm not buying that.
Well,
I think his floor is going to go down.
I don't see them breaking because I've had these conversations with these people, and the problem is not with him. The problem is that he's not being given a chance. And I try to remind them, do you feel that President Obama was given a fair chance to implement his programs as president? And of course, yes, of course he was. In fact, he had the entire country behind him, including the corrupt news media, and that's the real problem. So he's laying out his scapegoats. He did it at the inauguration. He continues to hammer on his scapegoats, and that's been effective for him.
Well,
it's deflecting.
I do
criticism.
believe at this time we have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and
But it's the Democrats that are blocking.
Yeah, right. As if the minority could actually do that.
Well, they got to stop it.
But things have been righted with the election that we had yesterday in the great city of Manchester, and in New Hampshire, and in the nation, and we're going to talk about that coming up next because there was some amazing things happened. And I think I got some really good stories about this election. You probably won't hear anywhere else, and I'm anxious to share them with you here. And it was really an astounding election. And so we're going to take a quick break. Please call in, folks, 640-3091. We enjoy beating our gums here, but we'd be much happier if you would call in and give us some guff or some praise or whatever. Participate. We hope we'll be right back with you after a short break. Okay, you've heard a POTUS report on the progress report, as we have every week when Mike is here. That was a nice, short, easy thing, and then I got on my high horse and delivered a real rant. And I'm still hoping that'll trigger some response from our viewers. But I think having done that, it's time to move on to the amazing results we had in the city of Manchester last night.
Local stuff.
Local stuff. And, it starts with the amazing victory of Joyce Craig, who barely lost out to Teddy 2 years ago by 64 votes, but this time cruised to an easy victory by
Big
over
turnaround.
2,000 votes. Was it 9 out of 12 wards she carried, I think?
Yes, all but three.
All
I
but
think
three.
The victory was about 1,500 votes.
Yeah.
About 2,000 more people voted this mayoral election than the last mayoral election.
Turnout was huge.
and which
I mean, it
which
was
is big.
big
That
factor.
talks about motivation. And then if you look at the numbers, I'm interpreting that to mean of the 2,000 extra voters, Joyce picked up about 1,500 of them. So what that tells me is that the momentum, the motivation, is on the Democratic side. And we're getting down into politics here, so I'm not going to be shy about it. That's my experience. Also, I don't go to Republican canvassing events. Maybe I should to check them out, but I don't. But I have been to many Democratic events, and the enthusiasm is absolutely palpable. There are people there, and you got to understand, these campaigns, it's always the same old veterans that come out and do these things. But this year, there is a whole nother universe of people showing up, grabbing packets, organizing themselves. I saw the greatest thing. I saw a group of 5 young women, and I'm talking in their 20s, young women who everybody says, oh, they never come out and vote. These 5 young women made a point of getting canvas packets in a contiguous area. So they met at one location and fanned out as a team to cover 5 times more than an ordinary canvas would cover.
Yeah.
And that was completely self-organized. That's not something that they were told to do. They figured this out for themselves.
Really?
And and quintupled their effectiveness as volunteers.
Wow.
On that one day alone. So the excitement's there, Bob. The energy is there.
Oh, a bunch of wonderful young people very active in this campaign.
I'm
really excited.
I'm looking at Ward 8. We actually have a Ward 8 committee that has actually had some meetings together. In the past, these committees have kind of been in name only. They might
Yes.
show up for the
Yes.
Christmas dinner and maybe sit at the same table. But it's we're actually organizing. We've got officers who are willing to meet, and we're going to get out there even between elections and raise Cain for Democrats in our ward.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I tell you how important this mayor election was. I was at a committee meeting in church at the time the polls closed, and I happened to get down to my phone and just clicked in to see what happened. And I heard the announcement about Joyce's victory from a post from Tom Perez, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. That's how I learned about it. I mean, this thing was an awesome race, and it had national implications. Everybody understood it. Before we got the outstanding results from Virginia and New Jersey and some other places, but principally those 2 states, this was national news. It was being talked about on Morning Joe, and I guess lots of other national news media have talked about this race. And as I've said perhaps in the show before, this is the first time I can remember a municipal election in the state of New Hampshire had TV ads beaming to us from the Boston TV.
You know what I like, Bob? When the ABC News announced it this morning on the morning news, they just said Mayor of Manchester. Didn't say New Hampshire because you don't have to say that anymore.
And I thought
Made me proud.
That was very sweet. We want to talk about other results in the city, though. There were some stunners and some real interesting things. Your ward, Mike, Ward 8, is one of the most interesting.
We took it on the chin.
Well, you did and you didn't. I mean, you had a candidate, Erica Connors, who's a current serving on the Board of School Committee.
And a great school committee member.
And a great school committee member, a very, very fine young woman.
But she took the special election.
And she lost one election last night and won another, and the same night with the same person. That's pretty unique. She won to be a state rep to replace Steve
Steve
Valancourt,
Valancourt, and that is a
who
tremendous
served so
improvement.
long and died when he was in office this last term.
And we've been without representation
Been
for
without
quite a while.
She won that race and narrowly lost her campaign to be returned to the Board of School Committee. That's pretty amazing. In my ward, which is Ward 12.
I want to point out, though, in Erica's defense and also in Betsy DeVries's defense, Ward 8 is a very Republican ward.
Yeah.
It is a Republican majority ward. We have a very active community of active Democrats in Ward 8, and we have managed to scratch and claw our way to having Democratic aldermen and school committee members. But it's always a challenge. And in Ward 8, if you're a Democrat, you once run scared and don't look over your
Yeah.
shoulder. So in their defense, they both ran very solid campaigns. They were out there. They had their volunteers, but it was an uphill battle.
Yeah.
And they weren't
Erica,
able to.
the difference was you weren't on our show Monday night. That's the difference. You should have been on our show. I guess she was on a later show, but yeah, we wish her well. Let's see. I wanted to
We got
go
to talk about Ward 3 too.
Ward 3. Yeah, Ward 3.
That was a real.
This
tough
was
one.
front page news in the Union League this morning. Pat Long, who's a good friend of this show, and I think a great servant of the city of Manchester, an alderman, I think he was the dean of the aldermen, and he's served long and done so much for this city. You can't. There's show horses and there's workhorses. Pat Long is a workhorse, and he barely lost
6 votes.
6 votes in Ward 3.
Three voters go the other way.
And there's going to obviously be a recount. It's not impossible to imagine this thing being reversed. And he lost to a guy with a name with a lot of resonance for Manchester, guy named Tim Baines, who runs a wonderful restaurant called The Mint. We all love The Mint. Wonderful restaurant right downtown in Manchester, one of our, fine restaurants. And his father had, a distinguished career of service as mayor of Manchester. So Pat knew from the get-go that this was going to be tough. But I can't tell you the contributions Pat has made to this city, as he talked to me here, getting on the bed bug problem, which sounds kind of like you should laugh at it, but it's no laughing matter if you're an immigrant.
And he solved
family.
it, and he brought it to
Trying
the State
live
House.
in Langer, rooming house down there, and facing on Canal Street. That and to make sure that we had the funds that we could do the repaving and the improvement of our infrastructure, our streets. Streets a lot better today, isn't it, than it was? I mean, Pat Long deserves so much credit for that. But I have to say, if it ends up being Tim Baines, I hope he'll be a great alderman and make a great contribution. But I'm sure Pat will make a great contribution.
Yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere, Bob.
Not going anywhere.
You're going to still
He's
see
a guy.
him
He's a
doing that
guy who wants to
volunteer
do
work.
a lot of things, and he gets a lot of things done. He's still going to be a state rep. He's the chairman of our delegation. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the other races. In Ward 12, my home ward, you remember, I don't know if you were watching the show Monday or at another time earlier than that, we had this amazing young guy on, a refugee from Kuwait named Hassan Essa, and he came within about 70 votes of upsetting Alderman Keith Hirschman, which is amazing when you consider Hirschman's, held his seat for, I think this was his attempt to seek his 3rd consecutive term as an alderman.
Plus, he held the seat before that.
And he'd held the seat before
Patrick
that.
Arnold
And,
wrested it away from him.
And he almost got beat by this 20-year-old young kid who's very impressive. He's in the Air National Guard. He's studying at UNH. Very conscientious
I
and a
hope he
hard
sticks
worker.
around.
He's going to be heard from again. Let's see. What other issues? Oh, Dave Scannell for Board of School Committee in Ward 2. Won by 22 or 24 votes, I think. Very, very close. We had some people we like that did not make it. Connie Van Houten, school committee person from Ward 12, lost in her bid for re-election. Dedicated advocate for public schools.
She's someone else who I don't think is going to miss a beat. She's
Oh,
going to continue.
She was
all
right
the
up
work
at Concord
that she
today
does.
to talk about a school voucher bill,
Yeah,
which
so,
would weaken
we're
weaken
fortunate
public
to have
education.
people like that, and that kind
And,
of ties back to the discussion we had with the candidates on Monday, Bob, where
Yep.
several of them said, "Look to what they do when they're not running for office. That's how you
Yep.
can tell the kind of person."
That's the
that
kind of
these
person they
folks
are.
gonna be."
Bill Berry, was on with us Monday and got a
well.
nice victory out. Will Stewart, an outstanding young man who has done a lot for the city, including, the bike share program I'm so excited we have in Manchester. Hope you all tried out those bikes. He's going to be the new alderman from Ward 2. And so there's some really good things there. Now, we had some other interesting things we voted on here in the great city of Manchester. And I'm hoping somebody's going to want to kick in on this. We had Keno. The state of New Hampshire, in its wisdom, decided, and this was pushed by Governor Sununu, Governor Sununu wanted to have statewide kindergarten available, in public kindergarten available in the state of New Hampshire.
But didn't want to pay for it.
Nobody
so he's
wanted to
pick the pockets of
Nobody
our
wanted to pick. So we
most unfortunate.
we like to find another way to do it, and the answer was Keno, and but it was subject to local communities, including the city of Manchester and other municipalities. They had to vote on whether they would agree to have Keno be part of their structure and the use of funds for funding kindergarten. And it passed in Manchester, it passed in Nashua, it failed in Keene, it failed in Concord, it passed in, I think, 7 other municipalities. What do you think about that? I'm always amused. I have a good friend named Lou D'Alessandro, great contributor in New Hampshire. He's on our show the first Wednesday of every month. I think everybody in Manchester that knows anything probably knows that one thing Lou's identified with, he wants a casino in New Hampshire. That's his major thing. I mean, for a lot of good things, but he wants a casino. He's brought that up again and again and again. And yet he's an opponent of Keno. And that's kind of interesting. But we voted for it here. What do you think about that? Do we have a call?
Yeah, we'll see. It'll come up on the screen.
Okay, I thought I saw a call coming.
I got to give my opinion. Oh, we do. We do have sound. I want to give my opinion on the Keno first.
Please.
I began expressing it a little bit on our Monday special show we did with the candidates. I do not see this as a righteous way to fund education. I do not see it as good for the city of Manchester. I think it's another step in the degradation of our society. I don't think it's a good way to do things.
Okay.
I think as much as people don't like tax increases, I think at least you know where it's coming from. This is dark money. This is money that probably should be going to feed children, but instead is being diverted into gambling, in bars. I'm not a fan of casinos either, and I think I'm being consistent. I just don't think this is a good way to fund education. Okay. And I don't think Manchester. I think what we're going to see, you're not going to see Keno in Bedford. You're not going to see Keno in Amherst. You're not going to see Keno in Londonderry.
That's exactly what concerns me.
It's going to be
as
in
best I
Manchester.
can understand it. The Keno proceeds will go to the state to be reallocated.
We're not going to get 100% of that money.
We're not going to get 100% of the money
suck
back.
the money right
Some
out
of that money will
Manchester.
go to Bedford, which I think you're right, will not approve Keno. And that to me was a huge reason not to support Keno. But on the other hand, if it's the only way we get the kindergarten that we
have
believe
full
we
day
need,
kindergarten. We have it here in Manchester. We don't need Keno to fund full day kindergarten.
Well,
what we
we'd
do
like-
need is our state reps to not vote against funding for full day kindergarten up in Concord, as so many Republican state reps did.
Yeah.
Now I'm on a soapbox. I think that was absolutely despicable. We provide it. We don't need Keno to provide full day kindergarten in the city of Manchester. But I want to get to Sandy.
okay.
We've only got 5 minutes in the segment, so. Sandy, you still there?
Hello?
You there, Sandy?
Hello, Mike Lally.
How
and
are you?
Bob. How are you doing?
We're doing all right. What do you got to say? You called in when we're talking about Keno. You want to talk about Keno?
Yeah, I wanted to mention when I was at the polls from 9:45 in the morning, and I stayed there till after I got the results. at 8 o'clock.
You're always there,
I went
Sandy.
home twice and took a rest for an hour and ate, but I stayed all day long. Anyway, listening to some people talking about Keno, there were 2 or 3 people right behind me, Tom Cassiatonis and another restaurant pizza place, and they were talking about it. They get an 8%. They get an 8% cut.
That's
of
right.
what goes through.
That's
I
right.
didn't know that. That kind of surprised me.
Yeah, that's pretty
And
generous.
so maybe that's why some people voted for it, you know, and then plus people like to do that instead of going, I guess, down to other places, Mohegan Sun or whatever, or up to Maine or whatever.
Oh yeah, we've
Just,
seen
you
him.
know.
That guy at the end of the bar that just keeps pushing the button and feeding his money into the machine hour after hour after hour. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. but I didn't know, and then so I turned around and I said, well, how come you get 8%? And they said, well, because it's more work. You have to give the people money. You have to do this. You have to do that.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, okay. I don't know anything about it. Never played Keno in my life.
Good for you.
And you know what I think of the election yesterday and being at Ward 8 for quite a few hours? I saw the last 3 or 4 hours a lot of young people, and they are independents, and they were voting for the young people. They were voting for...
Really?
Yeah, I see.
Really?
I can see that.
You could tell, and that other guy there, they're very young.
Cataldo and
Like,
Lahu, they are. They're both young gentlemen. They're go-getters.
Yep.
They're very attractive candidates, and
Yeah,
they work.
and-
They work. They knocked on
I'll
doors.
tell you, in Ward 8 here, they were around here quite often, and they gave a good impression. And I'll tell you, so that's what I think. I think the independents. I've worked on the ballots. Been a ballot inspector. I've been a ward moderator. I've been different things down there.
Yeah.
And I'm going to run for selectman next time.
Okay.
But anyway, because I guess they're really short. So, but I was going to say the election itself. I was surprised with Pat Long. I was very surprised. I was very surprised with Deborah Langton. I know her. And
Yeah, I
she's
think
good
that was a
person,
bit of a
and she's very good
surprise.
for our schools.
Yeah.
I was surprised with that one.
Yeah.
Burkish and Shar, I knew that was going to be close because I've been in South Manchester for 79
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
I've been down south and a little bit of southeast all my life, you know, and so I got that idea. But looking around at people and everything and talking to people, the kids, I did a lot of calling. I told them I can't go around walking around, you know, with you guys. I can't do that anymore. I'm going to be 80 in 2 weeks, you know. I said, I can't.
Happy
yeah.
birthday,
But I
Sandy.
can do calling. So I would go up on Thursdays and Fridays, and I would call. I had 1, I had 5, I had practically every ward except my own ward, 8. But anyway, I knew people. I knew people from there throughout the city because of being on the school board and working for Manchester Housing. So to make it short anyway, calling these hundreds of people on the phone and talking with them and so on, you could tell the young people wanted some new young people in there. That's just my opinion.
Well,
Like
that's a
Al
great point.
Hynek says, in my opinion. Well, that's my opinion. Everybody else has their own. But as far as Trump voters, when I get on that subject, don't like the man at all.
You're
I
with
don't
us.
even want to say anything.
Yeah.
I think he's probably going to be the worst president, as you said, Bob, that we have had.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't understand all the stuff he does and why he does it. And if they say he has like IQ 156, well, I don't. You know what?
Where's
Some
he put
people
it?
have high IQs, but they don't have any common sense. Well,
Well,
I just don't want to get into a war. That's all. I have five.
Right.
5 grandsons.
Right. That's the most important
Going to
thing.
be
We got
in
we
their
got to.
20s and so on, and I
don't
just don't
wanna-
want to see that coming. But anyway.
All
All right, Sandy. Thanks a lot.
Thanks
you
for calling.
know, the people are diehards. I have people at church. I have to be very nice to them. They're Republicans. They're not giving up on Trump, like you said. They're not giving up on Trump. And I can't believe it. I'm like, I have to say a prayer to myself when I get into the pew and think about it. But I just, say to them, well, to each his own. When I don't know what else to say, that's what I say.
Fair
To
enough,
each his
Sandy.
own. And they know I'm a Democrat.
Thanks.
Well, anyway, I'll let you guys go.
Thanks
You
for
got
the
a good
call.
show. I'm
Thanks,
so
Sandy.
happy Mrs. Craig won. She graduated with my youngest daughter. And I'm just so happy for them.
Yeah.
And that's all I can say. And Kavanaugh and some of the others. And I think we're going to do well in the city. And with Virginia and New Jersey and everything, when I came home and I watched that, I was so happy that the Democrats, outside of Utah, I think, got a Republican in there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So anyway, I'll let you go.
Okay.
And Bob, it was nice seeing you at the polls.
Oh, I enjoy.
I saw him with his railroad hat from Alaska.
I enjoyed.
I don't have Alzheimer's yet, Bob.
Okay. Sure.
And Mike Fowley, it's good to see you too.
Thanks, Sandy.
Nice,
Take care, guys.
nice to
That's
have your
in
company
my
word.
opinion.
Yep. Bye.
Well,
Yeah,
that was a great
I enjoyed
call from.
spending some time from her at your home ward yesterday.
She's a fixture down there.
Yeah. Well, it's time for
very
our last break, and we'll be back. I've got a great story from Ward 12 to tell you when we come back. It's just delightful, and I hope you'll get a kick out of it. And we hope for more participation, too. 640-3091. If you want to talk about this is the year anniversary of the election of Donald J. Trump with an electoral college win, but not a popular vote win. And we had a remarkable election in Manchester yesterday, and we had some other great results around the nation. We'll get to all that, and I got a great story from Ward 12. We'll be right back. Well, anyway, we're back. This is the progress report for this Wednesday, November 8th, and we're about to get some real winter-feeling weather, I guess. I just went out and put snow tires on my car. It cost me a hell of a lot of money. You know, snow tires are expensive, folks. I think they're probably worth it, but be prepared. You're going to pay a lot of money for
I
snow
haven't
tires.
put snow tires on my car for years.
I
Bob.
got to get
I
up
used
to.
to.
I got to get up to Concord, you know, in the January-June
Yeah,
period,
that's
and
true.
the first
That's
2 or
true.
3 months can be kind of tough. So I represent and vote in Ward 12 at Northwest Elementary School, where we had some really interesting races. I've already mentioned one, the young man Hassan Essa, who ran a really excellent campaign and came amazingly close to unseating the incumbent alderman. We had a very fine school committee person, Connie Van Houten, lose to Kellyanne Rogers, a newcomer, and I hope she's going to be a great school committeeman. But this is the story I wanted to tell you about this.
I've been waiting all night. You've been teasing me with this story
You know,
since we came down here.
we have votes not just for aldermen and school committee, but for ward officers. You have to elect a moderator and a clerk, which my wife has been the clerk, but she didn't run this time, so this is her last election. And then you have things called selectmen in the ward. Now, usually in the ward, the issue is, can you find somebody to fill that spot on the ballot? Can you get enough people to, you know, make sure you got the people to do the ward, that the work that needs to be done on election day?
The job
for
of
each ward.
selectmen in Manchester is much different from the job of
Oh
selectmen
yeah, it's not
out
like
in
running the
towns.
government like you do in towns.
That you run the elections.
You run
It
the
is
election.
real
You
work.
run around and help tally the votes and help people vote and all of that.
You set up those
Well,
those horses at the beginning at 5 in the morning, the corrals where all the
Yeah,
people
you got to
with
get
the
up at
signs,
4 in the
it's-
morning to be there. Anyway, it happened that we had a contest for selectmen in Ward 12. Very
An
unusual.
embarrassment of riches.
An embarrassment of riches. And one of the people running for selectman was I think probably a recently arrived refugee from a country in Southeast Asia, and he got there and he had the biggest banner I've ever seen in an election place. It was about 4 by 6, and it had his picture on it, and it said, I don't know, Gupta, whatever it was, for selectman. And he had his friends there. And he was running a real campaign for selectman in Ward 12. And I went over to him, I said, this is really interesting. You know, you're fairly new. Oh, yeah, I'm fairly new. And I could recognize him. I couldn't recognize him because his picture was on the poster. And then I picked him out of the small group that was with him. I said, well, this is really great. This is, you're here. You're in America. You're doing democracy. Well, This is, at some point they decided they might need another vote. So they brought in this fellow person from the same ethnic place that they were from. And his eyes were sort of vacant. He was having trouble speaking. And they brought him in for same-day registration. And people didn't know quite what to do because he could not answer. He could not read. Could not answer. He apparently could not answer. Oh yeah, we'll help him. We'll help him get registered. Well, they called the clerk's office, and they eventually went to the Secretary of State's office. And they said, well, what you do is you write out some questions in a box that says yes and a box that says no, and you record his answers. Well, he wasn't able to do it.
Oh, my.
He could not do it.
This kind of reminds me of those stories where, you'd go down to the waterfront and round up some voters, you know what I mean?
Well, or, like Chicago, where supposedly, people vote for,
For one vote.
For one vote.
In a selectman's race. That's a lot of effort.
The people that are yelling about election fraud will say, well, this is election fraud. No, it was just an attempt to get one more vote from one of their fellow people from their home country. And they did not register him because he just wasn't quite able to do it. But I thought that was really something. I got the biggest kick out of that. And by the way, this guy with his giant campaign sign, did not quite make the cut.
Oh, that's too bad. Well, I hope he got some donors to pay for the sign. Could I regale our viewers with an anecdote of an experience I had voting yesterday in Ward 8?
Sure.
I think, Bob, I really am opposed to what I see as voter suppression efforts, and among them is the requirement that you present an ID to vote. I understand the argument of other people. I understand I might be being obstinate. I've had some people that I admire very much tell me that they're just rolling with it. It's okay. It bothers me. It really bothers me. And just because I'm a pain in the neck when I am asked at the check-in to present my ID, I always complain about it.
Yeah.
And they know me, and they know I'm going to complain about it.
Right.
But I try to do it in a humorous and friendly way. I know it's not their fault, and everybody's trying to do their job. But I really it gets my dander up, the idea that I have to, that they doubt me when I give them my name, that they think I'm a liar, that I'm making up my own name and address. That bothers me because I'm telling them the truth.
Yeah.
So anyway, I go through this little ritual that I've been going through since this has started, and we got a state ballot for the state rep race, and then we got the municipal ballot. So I go into the voting booth to vote, and lo and behold, despite this effort to avoid voter fraud by making me produce my driver's license, I got 2 ballots.
I love it.
So I was very happy to make quite a production about going back to the table and returning the extra ballot that they gave me after they were so careful to make sure that I wasn't trying to vote in somebody else's place. I did not vote twice, Bob. I would never even consider it. But, come on.
Okay. Well, there's our stories from Manchester. We probably have more that we could tell, but again,
I've got a few I can't tell, actually.
Yeah. Please call in if you want to. I just wanted to mention that, since the election a year ago that gave us President-elect Donald Trump, now our president, we've had 10 special elections in the state of New Hampshire for the State House. I think there's only one for the Senate, which was, an outstanding victory by Kevin Kavanaugh over the incumbent or the prior occupant of the office, not the incumbent, but he'd been serving before Scott McGilvery died shortly after he was elected, David Booten. And then we've had the others in the House. We've mentioned one of the House races in Ward 8, your good colleague, Erica Bodwell, Eric Connors, I'm sorry, who won the position narrowly. There was another one in Sullivan County, a guy named, I think his name is Brian Sullivan, in Sullivan County, actually. I read about that. But in any event, we have had 10 special elections since November of last year, and of those 10, 8 have gone to the Democrats, and 6 of those have been flipping the seat from Republican to Democratic.
And that's more important. Actually.
And that's more
the number.
important.
And
that's
Ward 8 being
that's
one of them.
very, very powerful. I mean, we saw outstanding results in the big national races that were being watched by everybody, which was number 1, Virginia, and number 2, New Jersey. We heard a lot about that, but our own history right here in New Hampshire suggests things are moving away from the Trump style of
Nationally,
governing.
though, nationally in special elections, Democrats haven't been able to report that kind of success. We've been fairly.
We have
lost
not.
in Georgia. I mean,
But
it's-
there's a lot of enthusiasm now for people to, come out and vote the Democrats in because of I think the barrenness of the Republican policy agenda. And I
Hey,
do
listen,
want to talk.
Both political parties have their internal issues, Bob.
They do.
And,
They do.
and they both need to be addressed.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to be a Democrat, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity for Democrats going forward, and that the momentum and opportunity is going to only grow. But we can't screw it up.
We can't. And as somebody said, I guess it was maybe outgoing Governor Terry McAuliffe in Virginia, the Democrats are no longer on the mat. They've come off the mat. In Virginia, and the national press has been all over this, so I'm sure I'm not telling anybody here who's interested in politics anything they don't already know. It was supposed to be a very close contest with some polls showing the Republican candidate, Ed Gillespie, with a slight lead. It turned out to be not close, not very close, and the Democrat won. The Democrat lieutenant governor candidate won. The attorney general won, and there was a huge turnout, particularly in the districts that leaned toward the Democrats. I'm happy to say my daughter was down there. She did some door-to-door campaigning in Northern Virginia, and she showed up at the election party in Fairfax. That's where they had it, and wore her Moms Demand Action T-shirt.
You let her in.
And they let her in, and her friends, and she had a wonderful time and was feeling really upbeat. I'm really, really proud of her.
But that's the kind of thing, Bob, that I was talking about that we're seeing here in Manchester. There are people that, you and I who've gone to meetings for years, these folks had not bothered to come. They weren't
Yep.
interested yet, and they're there now. And I only hope that the local Democrats, the city Democrats, the state Democrats don't screw it up, as I said, and lose those people. They become disenchanted and they stop turning out.
Well, there was all this angst and concern about the Democrats. Is the Hillary-Bernie split still tearing the party apart? Have they not got a good message? All of that. People are feeling a lot better today about all those things than they were, 2 days ago.
I can tell you the people on the ground, the people that are volunteering to go out and knock on doors, deliver pamphlets, hold signs, they're coming from both camps, and they're sharing the coffee and donuts together, and that's not the issue. I think where the issue is higher up in the party.
I agree, and of course the other state that was big yesterday, although the Democratic victory was expected there, was the state of New Jersey, where there was another, But I believe the margin actually in Virginia was larger than it was in New Jersey, which was supposed to be the slam dunk, and Virginia was supposed to be close. In any event, things are changing, and they're beginning to sense the possibility that this time next year will be a wave election that will return to the Democrats to power in the state houses and maybe even in the U.S. House of Representatives. One of the things I liked in Virginia, you probably read about this, but I really liked it, is for the first time they elected a transgender woman to a state legislative seat in the Virginia House of Delegates, and she replaced a Republican who was very big on not favoring, people like her having equal rights at all. So, here it is. We've already come to the end, I guess, of our show, and we've enjoyed it, and we hope you have too. And we're going to be back next week with another edition of the Progress Report. Probably won't be on politics. Maybe you'll all be glad to hear
let's
that.
take a break.
We're going to take a break from politics. I've got some ideas, but I'm not pulling the trigger on anything. But again, please check out our Facebook for the Progress Report. I'll try and keep that up and get that going a little bit. And I want to thank my good friend Mike Farley, who was not feeling his very best tonight, but did his very best as usual. And we'll see you next week with another edition of the Progress Report. This is where you want to be if you want to get the real inside dope. With a smile.
See you next week, folks.
Bye.